Hello, and welcome to Lowering Costs and Raising Expectations in Developmental Math and College Algebra using Alta with OpenStax. I'm John Britch, a marketing nerd at Knewton, and joining us is Andrea Pellerito and Christy Rieg. And you have come into this conference muted. We do that to preserve the audio quality. However, at any time during the session, you can enter your question into the question bar. If you see there's a GoToWebinar bar, just type questions, type into the field, and we'll be able to answer your questions at the end of the session, or if pertinent, like right during the session. So just to test that functionality out, do you hear me and see the screen that says agenda right now? Can someone please type in the question bar to let us know? And yes, thank you, Elizabeth Flood. Thank you, James Adams. Perfect. Okay, this session is going to be recorded, and we'll send you a link afterwards, and you can respond to that link with any other questions or comments you have. So our session today is 45 minutes, and our facilitators today, are Christy Rieg, math professor at a Merced College, and Andrea Pellerito, senior content developer and a colleague nerd at Knewton. So why don't we jump right in, and Christy, can you tell us about yourself and your students?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Christy Rieg, and I have taught math from 8th grade all the way up through college. And whenever my students ask how long I've been teaching, I always tell them since before Kelly Clarkson won American Idol, because my first year student teaching, that was the big thing, was everyone was talking about American Idol. So it's just a good reference point. I teach every level from differential equations all the way down to pre-algebra. But I really love the lower levels, the pre-algebra and the beginning and intermediate algebra, because they really allow me to offer more hands-on approach to teaching. And I feel like the students are a little hungrier to learn sometimes because they might have come in a little jaded, and I like turning that around. So as he said, I teach at Merced College, which is almost in the center of California, a little bit north of the geographical center of California. And a fun fact about me, I actually don't live in Merced County. I live in the county right next to it in Mariposa, but there's no stoplights in my entire county. And I just thought that was funny when I moved here. All right, yep, there we go. So here is a little information about where I work. Merced College is actually 2 campuses. We have our main campus, which has about 10,000 students. And then we have a satellite campus in Los Banos, which has another 1,000 students at it. And the top 3 AS degrees at our school are business administration, administration of justice, and registered nursing. So we have a pretty good split between people that need statistics and people that need intermediate algebra as their end class. So we have a lot of students in both of those classes. And just to kind of give you an idea of the financial status of my students, of those 11,000 students that we have on campus, over 9,000 of them, maybe not individually, but there were over 9,000 financial aid awards given last year, totaling over $28 million on our campus. And so this is one of the reasons why I was really looking for a low-cost alternative for my students, because the other programs we had been using or even the textbooks we were using were costing $150 to $200, and my students just didn't have that money to spend on just one class. And so you can see the age distribution. Last year, we have quite a few students that are just out of high school, up to age 24. That's the vast majority of our students. But we do have a lot of returning students too. The oldest student I had was 84 years old. So we definitely see all ages. And so it's really nice to be able to, which I'll talk about later, have a textbook as well as an online program that supports that.
Super.
And so I teach 2 courses right now using Alta, pre-algebra, and in a typical semester I teach 2 sections of pre-algebra, so half of my schedule is pre-algebra, and then I'm also teaching an intermediate algebra using Alta, so that's what I'm using right now, but I'm also behind the scenes preparing for spring semester, and I'm going to be starting statistics with Alta and OpenStax, so I'm preparing that course as well.
Super, thank you. So, obvious question, why did you choose Alta?
Oh, okay. Well, of course, one of the first reasons, as I mentioned, was the low cost. And so it's only $44 for 2 years. And I don't teach calculus right now, but our campus is switching to calculus as well, because calculus is a 3-book series, and that $44 goes across the whole series. I love the free aspect of the OpenStax book. So they're getting a textbook in my class and the online software for a total of $44. And when I started using it last year, I decided to use it in a face-to-face and an online class. And the reason I did that is I really was looking for something for my online students, but it's very hard to get them to communicate with me until it's too late. They'll frequently come in 3/4 of the way through the semester and say, well, these are all the problems I had, but they never told me about them. So by incorporating Alta in my face-to-face class, if there were issues, of course there were issues because I was learning the new software as well, I could hear about it on a weekly basis. We would pull up the screen in front of the class and I would show them how to input homework problems, or when I had said verbally that I allowed late work, but I had not chosen the right setting in Knewton's side, my students would bring that to me. And so it was a great learning situation for myself and my students by having it in both situations. It was also great because then I could compare the results to see how the new software affected the 2 different types of students. I also, one complaint I had with the previous publisher that we had used was that my students would just go straight to show me a similar problem, and they would see the problem worked out, and they would take the new numbers from their new problem and just plug it right in and force those numbers and never really ingest the problem. But since Alta is mastery based, it helps the students really understand what's going on. It really makes them think and provide thoughtful solutions. And I tell them the very first day of school, if you guess and you just plug in numbers to try to get them to give you a solution, they're going to start offering remedial problems to you, and you're just going to make your problem longer. So it's better if you take the time and really understand what's happening up front and provide that correct answer the first time. And of course, that remediation is there as needed. That's great. That's a wonderful thing for them to have. But there's no sense in going down that road if all they're trying to do is find answers. There's also some great videos along with Alta, and it has the text in there. And what I find is that my students are, they're starting their homework ahead of time just because they want to understand what's happening in my class. I don't have a traditional flipped classroom, but I also have a very hands-off approach. And so I will create worksheets for my students to work on in groups with some guided steps and the problems will get progressively difficult. And as you can see in this picture, I have an intermediate algebra class completing the square, and the last problem there, number 5, is deriving the quadratic formula. And so the students that want that extra information ahead of time so they can come into class really understanding what's going on, they start the homework early, and they probably don't finish it, but they can come in with well-formed questions ahead of the lesson.
Super. Thank you, Christy. Christy will be returning later in the session to talk about how she actually uses Alta with OpenStax in her Canvas implementation, and she'll have some best practices and the things in Alta that she uses. But right now, what we want to do is, since Alta is different from other courseware, it's different from other homework systems, we thought it would be useful to spend some time just really defining and going under the hood to answer the question, what exactly is Alta? So for that, we bring on Dr. Andrea Pellerito.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to, like John said, tell you a little bit about Alta, give you a look under the hood, quick little demo of how it works, and then also dig into some of the data and reporting functions that we offer for all of our instructors. Before I do that, though, a little bit of background about myself. Before I entered this Alta, this Knewton world, I started my career by teaching at Indiana University, and I taught there for about 8 years, although I taught chemistry instead of math. Nonetheless, about six and a half years ago, I left that teaching position to join a traditional publishing company where we did textbook revisions, online homework systems. There was an adaptive component to that as well. And I worked there for approximately 6 years. And then earlier this year, moved over here to become a nerd. And my reason for doing that was really to have a big influence on the way that students are learning. Really important to me that our materials are of high quality, but at the same time, low cost and accessible for students. So I came over here to make that happen. And it's been fantastic ever since. So on top of really working on our content development, I had the opportunity here to do some expansive research in both teaching and learning across all of our disciplines. So that's my background. Knewton's background is a little bit of a journey as well. As we've transitioned, and I'll talk about that in a minute, through the history of the company, what's been really important to us is that we're teaching students, but we empower you, the instructor, as well. We want to make sure that you're able to teach your class however you want to. We're here as an asset for you as your students, but we want you to be confident in the way that you're teaching your students. So we do that through this adaptive AI-driven system so that each student can be met exactly where they are, get them up to speed, get them through the material that you're teaching so that you can conduct your class in the way that you know is best. So Alta is a pretty new product, but Knewton has been around for about 10 years now. Prior to this last year, there were a lot of partnerships between traditional publishing companies and Knewton. Knewton provided an adaptive engine in a number of different scenarios. In early 2018, we launched our own independent platform, Alta, as you'll see it in a few minutes, or as you already know it. But because we had that 9 or so year head start, we've been able to harvest a lot of information, and we've been able to provide a lot of resources into collecting data, learning how students learn, learning how they interact with material. We've interacted with more than 15 million students over the course of that time, and all of their experience have gone into building the platform of Alta. So even though it is pretty new, it's built on a lot of data so that we're able to make effective recommendations in our adaptive system so that we can be confident that what students are surfaced with is what they as an individual learner needs, which of course is going to be different than their classmates and friends. So, like I said, Alta is pretty new. It's about a year old now. The content that we provide within Alta comes from a number of different places. First, the instructional content comes from largely, or in part, at least from OpenStax, the text that you'll see. Textbook-like page that we have for every learning objective is typically from OpenStax, which is a big reason why we can keep our costs down. And one of the really great things for us is that since we have this partnership with OpenStax, we're actually able to have some influence on how they're proceeding as well, what they're publishing, what they're editing, and so forth. So it really is a partnership in that way. We also collaborate with a lot of different universities and individual instructors. Some of them provide us feedback on a very regular basis. Some of them provide us with other instructional pieces like videos. Every learning objective has at least 1 or 2 videos associated with them. Largely, those are provided to us through partnerships with universities and with individuals who have been in the classroom and teaching these courses for quite a long time. We have a content team here that's built of people like me who have had teaching experience and who have had product development experience as well. So by putting all of these pieces together, along with all of those years of data we've collected, we've been able to put together a robust learning system for students. When we talk about adaptivity, though, I think it's important for us to take a second and define it, because I think adaptive learning has kind of become a catchphrase across a lot of different instructional, educational companies over the last few years. And different companies describe it differently. Some of those companies, including one that I've worked for in the past, it's really very prescriptive, where a student might take a diagnostic test at the beginning of the semester and then everything they do is based on that. We approach adaptivity differently here. Ours is very much an on-the-fly adaptivity, where everything the student does, everything that they're thinking and inputting into the system is going to affect where they go from there. As an educator, I don't necessarily care to assign a problem based on what they knew last Tuesday or in August when they started the class. I want to give them the help that they need based on where they are right now, today at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's where Alta is different. We make sure that we're meeting the student exactly where they are at the time that they're taking the assignment. We certainly give you, the instructor, the flexibility to make sure that your Alta assignments match up with your goals of class and with your syllabus. But as far as the actual adaptive piece, like I said, we're making sure that that's as up to date for the students as possible. It's a little bit of a difference in the way we identify that than some of our other educational companies do. So if we take a look at this next slide, we see that Alta actually covers multiple different disciplines. As I mentioned before, I'm a chemist by training, so I spend a lot of time in that space. But as you probably know from your chemistry colleagues on campus or from your own experience, that's built heavily on a math background, as are disciplines like economics and parts of statistics as well. And because we have all of our learning objectives on this adaptive graph, we're actually able to share content a lot of times between different disciplines. Within the math component itself, we have a lot of different math disciplines that are covered. We go all the way from developmental math, like pre-algebra, all the way up through calculus, with all of the classes in between covered. So within that cartoon graph I showed on the other page, it's easy to get content or to have remediation from one discipline to another. If you're in college algebra, there may be some places where you need a little bit of developmental math refresher. And because of the way Alta is built, we're able to provide that. We didn't list all of the co-rec courses we have on here just for the sake of space, but again, I think you can get the point that we cover pretty much all of your different math courses that are offered, all the way from very low level through Calculus 3, so you can have a consistent experience throughout the math curriculum. So, go ahead.
If you're interested in a co-requisite course, we actually have a webinar. We have a video we can send you of a similar webinar talking strictly about co-requisite courses. So right now
that's right. That's a good point. And we also have some folks that can help you get that set up, or if your department is still experimenting with what a co-rec means to you, we can certainly set you up with some internal nerds and some instructors who have some experience in that as well, if you're sort of getting in on the ground floor there. So let's go ahead and go live into the product. Can you see my screen? So what I've done is set up a brief course. This is only going to be an assignment with a single learning objective in it, and I've chosen solve a system of linear inequalities by graphing. What I really wanted to do is give you an idea of how this adaptive learning system works for the student. When I go in as a student, and I've already entered my assignment, but when I'm looking at my very first question here, I have the opportunity to either read some instruction or watch a video, get some background information about this particular learning objective, or jump right in and answer questions. And I know when I was teaching, my chemistry students often tried to jump right in with the questions first, for the most part. Some students take a different approach, so we give that option. Students can start wherever they're comfortable at this point. We have a lot of questions that are very interactive in different ways. And one of the really great things about our math curriculum is that we employ Desmos to do the graphing. So they're very high quality and they're interactive as well for students. So if I'm a student, I'm working on my problem, I can very quickly take a look at what my question is asking me, start to graph this. It's all, we give the students some guidance so that they understand exactly how to use the system, use the graphing tools. But as you can see, I can just drag the points on my line here to get whatever y-intercept, whatever slope I need to. And then I'm not getting this question correct because I'm not reading it, but we also have options for allowing the student to demonstrate if these should be solid lines, if they should be dotted lines, and for these inequalities, which side of that line should be shaded. So, and we can do that just by using this tool over on the side. So I'm just going to input an answer here. It's not going to be correct, but if I submit this, you can see I get that question wrong. Automatically for these interactive problems, we give the students a second opportunity. Maybe they just made a mistake. Maybe they weren't really sure if they should use a dotted line or a solid line, whatever the case is. We give them that option to submit it a second time, although Knewton is collecting data when they have to use that second choice. I've opted not to change my answer here, but when I get that question wrong, what I see is that Alta gives me not only the correct answer, but a very detailed explanation as to how it got there. So it's teaching me not just how to solve this individual question, but it's teaching me a strategy for solving this type of a question. Like Christy said, I think there is a big temptation in students in a lot of different disciplines to just try to find a problem close to it that looks pretty much the same and retrofit an answer to that. We want to make sure, obviously, students can solve this problem, but we want to make sure also, and more importantly, that they're learning rules for solving the problem. So, you know, when do we use a solid line versus a dotted line? We give them instruction in there. How do we know which side to shade? We give them instruction there. So we walk the student in a stepwise fashion then through the problem, and we can continue and get a different problem. And in this particular learning objective, I'm going to get a similar kind of a problem because this is exactly what our learning objective listed up here at the top is asking me to do. But you can see if we look at the second problem, it's not a direct derivative of that first one. Some of the signs have changed. Some of the greater than and less than signs have changed. This time I don't have any or equals to. So it's not always going to be the case that I have one solid line and one dotted line. We give them several different iterations, several different types of the same question. Because again, as educators, our goal isn't to have them answer a single question. It's to have them learn this concept. If a student gets this question correct, that's fantastic. We have a progress bar up here at the top that'll start to fill in as students are getting questions correct. Importantly, they're not done with this question if they get a single question correct, right? Getting one question right doesn't mean that they have a deep understanding of the learning objective. This is a mastery-based system, so we need them to demonstrate enough of an understanding that we can confidently say that they're going to be able to get questions right in a variety of different scenarios related to this learning objective. As the student struggles, like I am here, getting everything wrong, Knewton will be able to identify that they need a little bit of help, right? I can keep getting questions wrong all day long, but I'm going to need some intervention from the system in order to help me really understand the concepts involved here. So I've gotten several questions wrong in a row. Knewton identifies I need some help and provides me with this written instruction. And like I mentioned before, this is essentially an OpenStax page, and it gives me a lot more detail than those answer explanations even did. It gives me very specific steps to follow in this case, some guidelines, and then every piece of instruction that we have, whether it's a textbook page like this or a video, is followed up by a question, just to make sure that I understand what it is that I read. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to get this one wrong as well. And again, for those assessments that follow instruction, same thing. I'm going to get very specific feedback to help me understand how to do that. Okay. So again, every click that I make here, the system is gathering information about me, figuring out where I need help. Alta can see that even that instruction didn't quite get me where I need to go. And what it's going to start to do is say, maybe the struggle that you're having isn't with this learning objective. It isn't putting all of these pieces together, but rather it's a prerequisite to that. And so it's going to take a step back and say, you can keep beating your head against the wall all day trying to solve this system of inequalities, but why don't we take a step back, figure out what the real problem is, and build up your skill set starting from a lower place. So if you'll notice, this question changed. Now, instead of a system of inequalities, it's giving me just one, still containing two variables. So the prereq is, let's just do this one inequality at a time. And again, the Desmos graph is going to work the same way. I can manipulate the points on the graph. I can shade it. I can use those dotted or single lines however I want to. And again, submit the answers, again, get answer-specific feedback here. And as we go through that, I'm just going to get a couple of these wrong just to make a point here. Alta's not going to judge me too much for getting a single question wrong. It's going to give me that feedback, let me try some more types of problems. But once I start to get too many questions wrong, again, it's going to show me some instruction. In this case, it's that written instruction again, but just as likely it can be video instruction. We have both written and video instruction for every question. Again, it's going to ask me a follow-up question, and it's making determinations about me based on what I'm getting, in this case, wrong, but also correct. And I think we'll just do maybe one more question here or two. At this point, I've gotten a whole lot of questions wrong. It's clear to Alta that I'm really struggling. I purposely got every single question wrong here. I think probably more likely for most students, what we see is that they get a few questions right, they get a few questions wrong, they see some instruction, they get one or two right, but not consistently. Regardless, when a student really isn't making the progress we'd like to see, we give them a recommendation to get some extra help from you, the instructor, or just take a break. Do something else for a little while, come back to these problems with a fresh mind. I can ignore that advice if I want to. I think we know that some students will, some won't. But as I keep working on this, what we're going to see in a minute is that it's going to take me another step backwards. Maybe my problem isn't solving linear equations or graphing linear equations, but we just need to see another prerequisite here. So again, my learning objective at the top changed. Now I'm looking at verifying that a given point is a solution to a linear inequality in two variables. So can I look, and this is an easier question type, right? It's multiple choice instead of creating that graph on their own, but can I at least look at this and know what these X and Y points mean, what this coordinate looks like, and which answers here are valid for this inequality. So it's going to, like I said, keep taking me backwards up to maybe 3 steps backwards in a few cases, and then it's going to build up my skill set from there. Again, in a more traditional homework system, if a student gets a single answer right, they're done, they can check it off their list. If they get too many questions wrong, a lot of times they just keep hitting their head on the wall and don't really make progress. We want to make sure that we're providing tools and that we're also providing prerequisite material to make sure that students are getting the skills, getting the tools that they need in order to eventually become successful within that learning objective. So really quick, brief overview of what that looks like for a student. I do want to talk a little bit, though, about how we can be sure that Alta is helping students, the kinds of data that we collect in order to look at the efficacy of our system. So John, if you want to take control back and get us back in the PowerPoint presentation, we can take a look at some of the reports that our teams have put together in that regard.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Great, yes. So in addition to our content development team and a whole bunch of engineers that we have in-house, we also have a really fantastic data science team who not only helps our content development team to collect enough data to make informed decisions about where we should be doing revisions, but they also work pretty closely with instructors and with departments to make sure that Alta is functioning the way that you want it to in your classroom. And we recognize that a lot of different schools have different goals for how and why they use Alta, but we want to make sure that you have the data that you need in order to be confident that it's working, or in order to change that experiment for the next semester. I'm going to show you the results of a couple of different studies that the data science team did so that we can look and see how Alta is functioning as a whole. So if we take a look at that next slide, what we see is that when we looked at students who are doing Alta assignments, 87% of the time, those students achieve mastery on their assignment. Remember, Alta is a mastery-based program, which theoretically at least means that if a student spends long enough in their assignment, they should be able to reach mastery. Fantastic, right? It's not that right or wrong, punitive, traditional homework system that we were used to seeing probably when we were all in school, but rather do enough problems of the right type until you can demonstrate that proficiency. So 87% of the time, students in Alta were able to do that. That's fantastic news. But again, it's not quite enough to convince us and our team, our data science team, that Alta is making progress for the students. Maybe they're just spending enough time in the system. So what our data scientists did is divide up those users into different categories. We have a group that we internally refer to as a struggling student. Those students that, based on initial assignments and initial questions answered within an individual assignment as well, we know that they're a traditionally high at-risk demographic within a course or within an assignment. Those are the students who typically don't finish the assignment, don't finish the class, struggle, don't make it through college, whatever the case may be. So we looked specifically at those students, and for this study, we looked at actually the whole bottom 25% of the class. And within those students, we saw that 82% of them achieved mastery. So nearly as high as that statistic from all of our students, but we're seeing that those most at-risk students were also largely finishing their assignments, which is really encouraging. Those that are most at risk, those that came in probably a little bit underprepared, maybe they hadn't seen college math yet or had a weak background from high school, whatever the case may be, they're the type of student who usually doesn't make it through, and at least they're finishing their assignments. Great news, but again, since Alta is a mastery-based system, we're concerned that that just means they're spending enough time. So we wanted to see how they're actually doing in the class. So we looked at their performance, not just on Alta assignments, but on subsequent quizzes that we took. And we compared students who achieved proficiency or mastery within their assignments to those students who didn't. So students that just didn't finish the assignments. And we saw across all students that there was a difference in students who didn't finish the assignments, didn't achieve proficiency or mastery. Their scores are about 55% on the quiz, 81% for those that did. Again, great news, but that may just speak more to motivation. Maybe those students weren't studying. Maybe that's related to why they didn't finish their Alta assignments. So again, we broke this up into different categories to really get a better look at what our different demographics were doing. So in our graph over on the side here, we have 3 different line segments. The top line are the advanced students, those at the highest 25% of the course. The purple line at the bottom here are those same struggling students, that bottom 25 that we talked about on the previous slide. And then the green in the middle is the rest of the students, the average students, that middle 50%. And what we saw is that although quiz scores went up for all 3 categories between students who did not finish their assignments and students who did, we definitely saw a marked improvement in all 3 categories. The slopes of these lines are quite different, and the biggest achievement gain that we saw was from the struggling students. Those students, again, who came in traditionally less likely to be successful in the course saw the biggest improvement in their quiz scores when they used the Alta system. So again, great news here, but we wanted to keep studying, keep looking at these students, because it may just be that spending time in the system, being exposed to that material is helpful. And we wanted to make sure that it was actually something special that Alta was doing that can be attributed to at least some of the success that we see here. So our data scientists went ahead and did a third study where they looked at a longer term efficacy within the same course. So what we looked at are students' time on task from the first assignment we looked at it through the entire course. But what we saw, not surprisingly, is that typically struggling students needed to spend more time in the system, especially early on, than their more advanced or more prepared counterparts. Probably not surprising there. But what we discovered was that their time on task actually decreased throughout the semester. So early in the semester, they may have needed a lot of help, a lot of time remediating what they should have learned in high school or what they should have learned in college algebra, if this is a calculus class, maybe, for example. So we looked at that time on task and how it changed over the semester. And for all groups of students, struggling, average, and advanced, we saw that that time on task decreased throughout the semester, and it decreased the most for those struggling students. And we can provide more details of this study, but basically the conclusion that our scientists were confidently able to make is that not only were the students retaining that remediation that they saw from previous classes, forming good study habits, good problem solving skills throughout, but also those early skills that they were learning at the beginning of the semester, they were able to apply later on. So if they learned a new skill in chapter 3, when they got to chapter 8, they were able to apply that skill without needing as much remediation back to those early topics as they might have otherwise. So like I said, we've done a whole bunch of studies of this nature, and we keep pushing the bar to get more and more information to verify that it's actually Alta that's doing something pretty special here for students. And again, we use this information as it's compiled to make improvements and additions to our platform as well. So one thing that we invite all of our instructors to do is actually work pretty closely with our data science team to collect your own data. You know, don't just take our word for it, but really do your own studies here and figure out if Alta and how Alta is helping you achieve those goals that you're setting out for yourself and your department, and also how to change your own experiences from one semester to the next. So I think Christy's going to jump back on and tell us how she uses Alta and maybe a little bit about some of the data that she uses as well.
Yes, so we are using Alta in more classes on our campus now. It started off with me last year, and I made the silly choice over Christmas break to learn how to use Alta, change my text to OpenStax, and start Canvas all in the same semester. So I had a very hectic Christmas break last year, but it was well worth it. And so the way I use it is for my online homework for my face-to-face class. So that would be 30% of my grade, where the other 70 would be the exams. And it's the main source of instruction for my online hybrid class. And so it is worth 50% of their grade to do both the assignment portion and the test portion that they do weekly, the weekly quizzes. However, the rest of their grade is in-class, midterm, and final exam, because on our campus, that's how we do our online classes. Okay, so there we go. So for me personally, the way I use it, I have a screenshot over here of one particular assignment. So one that's coming up this week in our pre-algebra text is in OpenStax. It's labeled section 11.2, graphing linear equations. And so from the Alta side, you can see there's two different main objectives. There's the solutions of linear equations, and then there's to graph linear equations, and then also with the vertical and horizontal lines. And so underneath each of those, there are multiple individual learning objectives. And so I can choose how many of those I want to do per assignment. And so I typically do all of them under one category. So solutions of linear equations would be maybe called 11.2a, and that would be the first half of the assignment. And I would choose the objectives that are relevant to what I'm teaching there. And then for the graphing, I would have 11.2b, because I like to name my assignments consistent with what they are called in the OpenStax text. I have a lot of students that still like the hands-on. They will actually order a hard copy of the OpenStax book to have with them to look through it. And so I like to have it consistent so you can choose either method. You could do my course without the OpenStax book, just using the instruction from Knewton, or you could follow the book as well. What's great is there's a preview as student option in the homework on my side of things. As I mentioned earlier, last spring was a learning curve for all of us, and so I would pull up the assignments in class, I would preview them as a student, and I would show them how to do the graphing examples or how to input empty set, the symbol for empty set, into the homework, because they just aren't as familiar with the math symbols and how to use their keyboard. And so it's great that I can see it from their point of view. And I can also do an example like Andrea showed and show them what happens when they get it wrong towards the beginning of the school year, just so they can understand what they're getting into. And so I usually have a couple of homework sections a couple of homework assignments per section, like I mentioned, the A and the B. And I like breaking it down that way, because when you have, as you can see on the screen, there's 7 individual learning objectives. If you need to master all 7 of those before you get 100%, it can be very discouraging. So I like to break it apart to have anywhere from 1 to 3 objectives on each assignment. So that way they can get that mastery, get that 100%, and move on to the next assignment. Next slide, thank you. So this is a screenshot from my Canvas right here. So one thing that's wonderful about Canvas and OpenStax is you can import the entire textbook into Canvas, and you can do that just by going to the Commons link, Course Commons, and searching for OpenStax and choosing the book you want. And it's so detailed that you can kind of see the little colored pencils on the top of my main page there. I didn't even have to input that graphic. OpenStax comes with pre-made pages for you that you can just edit how you like. So it was very helpful to start off with Canvas and have them integrated. But on the left, you can see my week 16 module. So the first click would be week 16. That would bring you to this main page that I have on the right, which lists my objectives and the assignments. And then the second, it says 11.2 graphing linear equations. There's a little link next to it, and that takes them directly to the Alta, the OpenStax text. And they can get there just by clicking next, and they can read the text. And if they don't want to read the text, they can click next again, and it will take them to 11.2a, the solutions of linear equations assignment. And that one is an assignment, so it has the due date and the points right there under it. And you can just keep going down this list. You can keep clicking next, and you don't have to go to any other site, you don't have to go outside of Canvas at all. Alta and OpenStax are all directly in there, and I have them integrated just section by section, ending with my quiz for the week. And you've already seen what an Alta assignment looks like, but in addition to that, on the page for this week, I list the section for 11.2, and then right below that I have links to videos that I pulled from OpenStax, so they have even more instruction, and you can just keep going back and forth for the students between the 2 different materials, and it's just all in one place, and I really like that. Next one. Oh, yep. So just real quick how I use Alta. By itself over here, you can see we have the section assignment mastery and the section activity. This is really important to me for my online class, because if they have not been active in 7 days, I want to know who they are, and I want to know why they haven't been active. And I don't have to go searching for them. I can click the word inactive with the 4 next to it, and it will give me a list of exactly who has not been doing anything in my class for the past 7 days on Alta. And once you get to that screen, I can select all 4 of those students and email them and say, where are you? How come, what's going on? Or have you dropped? And so it's just a great way at a glance to see what their mastery level is, how successful they're being, as well as how much they're participating in the course. All right, next one. So another tool that I receive daily, you can see this email came in just after midnight, is I get an email from Knewton every day that lists the top challenging learning objectives. And from this screenshot, you can just see the one course and the one section, but it lists the 2 objectives and how many students are struggling. But if you could see the whole email, it would show you all the courses that I use Alta. I use it in 3 different courses a semester, and it shows you that day what the top challenging learning objective is. And it comes every day via email. And the first day, the first day of a new assignment, I might not even worry about that email. But as we're getting into the 5th and 6th day of the week, and I notice I have a lot of students struggling, this is a great tool for me to go directly to that assignment, and then I can find those students' names directly. All right, so this is a screen from an individual student. So if I want to know exactly what's going on with a student, a lot of times they'll email me and they'll say, I'm not passing, I don't know why, what can I do? I can click on this student individually. I can see how much time they worked. I can see how long ago they were active. And then for them personally on their assignments, how much have they mastered? What are their average test scores? I can see all of this on one screen. And I don't generally just go through all of my students all the time and look at these screens, but when they email me and when they come to my office hours, it's very helpful to have this report. So instead of having to dig through everything, I know where to focus my time. Perhaps they aren't active, or perhaps they haven't spent a lot of time working on the assignment. I can get all of that information from this one screen. Now, on the next screen, you'll see that when a student does come to me and want to know on a particular assignment what's going on, I can pull up their assignment and I can see exactly what they've done. So this student, they looked at a video and then they got a problem wrong. And then they looked at another video and then they started to work on the maximum and minimum, and then there's a little 2 next to it because they actually got that problem wrong twice. And so this is very helpful to me because students often come to me and say, well, I had a problem on the homework, and it was like that one example you did in class last week, except there was a 16 in it instead of a 2, and that is not helpful information to me. But now that I know that there was a 16 in it, I can focus on the assignment they did. Okay, I see the 16 and the maximum and minimum. That's probably what they're talking about. And so on the next screen, you can see exactly what the student did. And this is just like the screen that Andrea showed us earlier, but now I'm seeing what they entered. And so I can see at first she entered y = 0, and then second she possibly tried to enter it as an ordered pair, maybe without the parentheses. You could see she was on the right track, but she just didn't know how to answer it. And so this is a great tool, especially in the online pre-algebra class when all I have is an email that says, I need help. This really helps me focus on how I can help them and what exactly they're doing wrong. It's really helpful to see the answers and what they've tried in order to help the students. All right, so then at Knewton, there's a lot of support that we have available. I mentioned already the email, but it's beyond just that daily email reminder of what my students need. There's a chat button on the problems. It's that square with the smiley face. So I can chat directly with someone on the technical team if I'm having support, or I've had students come into my office, log on my computer and chat with them. And one of the biggest chats that I see at the beginning of the semester is they are on the trial period and they're trying to get into to the full payment page. And so I just have them come into my office and work on it there. But there's always someone available to chat with them and help them out with those issues. Not only that, but there's that Canvas integration I mentioned. It's very easy, and I just followed along on this worksheet that someone had prepared and emailed me, and it was incredible just to follow that and load it in so easily into my course. But the best thing for me about the Knewton Support is there is a person, her name's Jenny, that I can email at any time, and she'll email me back right away and say, oh, this is how to fix that. And it's so personalized that I still last semester I was actually not responding to emails because I didn't realize they were just coming to me. I thought they were just kind of mass emails of people looking for information. And then one day they're like, "Hello, Christy, can you hear us?" And so it was just amazing that a single person was trying to contact me and asking how I was doing in my course. She sends me reports and tells me how many of my students have the trial period versus how many have already paid, which is important for my drop dates. She sends me midterm reports that tells me how my students are doing on average. And it's just, it's like I said, it's so personal. It's just amazing. And I love it.
Super. Thank you so much. Now we're going, I know we're a little over, but we've had some questions come in. So someone asks, I noticed that there was a lot of good explanation. This was during the demo showing the text explanation. Do you know if students who have trouble with the reading level, is that when they would watch a video? Oh, Andrea, we can't hear you.
Sorry, unmuted. We offer both videos and written instruction for every learning objective. Typically, we have usually one, maybe two pieces of written instruction and an average of about 2 videos per learning objective. All those videos also come with closed captioning and transcripts associated with them as well if students prefer to read. But we offer both for all students, and they're surfaced throughout the system. It just happened to be, as I was doing the demo, that both of the instructional pieces I saw were text.
Super, thank you. Anyone, if there are any other questions, please type them in now. We'll give a few seconds for that. Okay, I think we're done with the questions coming in, and I think we are at time anyway. So I would just like to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you all for coming. And so I will send you an email tomorrow with a link to this recording. And if you have any lingering questions, please you can respond right to that email and we can answer your questions. We can give you a sandbox course to play in. We can set up a more in-depth demo. You just hit reply to that email and we can get all that started. Someone can help you out right away. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.